I am Shannon Grady with Paramount Politics, and this is my co-host.
John Cummings, good morning.
Thanks for joining us today. A lot of things to talk about. Unfortunately, I wish I could say it was all good news, but unfortunately, it is mostly bad news. As many of you know, across the state and across the country, this past Tuesday we had elections for, city council. Some states had gubernatorial races, state senate, state house, that thing. But here in South Carolina, we basically had local mayoral races, city council, town council, that kind of thing. And the results came back, and virtually not a single candidate that I believe was a genuine conservative was elected. Certainly not here in Erie County. I hope that was different in other areas, but I know in the Conway mayoral race, we had a reelection of the incumbent, and in Surfside, the candidate I was supporting, Sidney Keaton, did not win. We did have a runoff in the Myrtle Beach city council race with Bill McClure and, oh my gosh, is it John Kraft? Is that who was
Yeah,
it?
yeah,
Who
I
was it?
think
He had
so.
the
Yeah,
run. Yeah, John Kraft. Yeah. So anyway, that'll be the 21st. Is that right? Yeah, the 21st, November 21st will be that runoff election. So you got a bad and a worse. So pick your poison. Um, I mean, you have the one guy who apparently supports allowing children to, be mutilated with this gender nonsense, and you have the other candidate who thinks it's fine to, rip a baby out of a woman's womb with abortion and supports it financially. So, I, I mean, I've heard people argue that, well, but at least Bill would be a new guy. And I'm like, he's just a new face on
yeah.
the
Meet
same
meet
coin.
meet the new boss, same as the old boss, right?
Yeah, and so I said, I can't get behind him. I'm sorry. I mean, and I made the point that there was virtually no candidate in that race who was really a true conservative, certainly not a Republican. And I know people say, oh, well, it doesn't matter because, John, come on, they don't actually vote on issues like abortion, etc. So why is that a concern? And I said, because it speaks to where their values lie. And leadership is all about values. And what are their values? Well, they're not my values. And so if they don't have my values, they don't share my values, then the things they would be voting on obviously are not going to reflect what I would want them to vote on. So that's kind of the metric that we use. John, am I wrong on that, John? Should we
No,
simply say that, well, they
no,
don't
not at
vote on
all.
those
And
issues?
and the turnout, of course, is an issue as well. I mean, how many people voted in the election? I was reading that 19,000 people voted in the Myrtle Beach election. Well,
Yeah.
what's the percentage there? I mean, around the country, 10%, 20%, 30%. I mean, that's what you
Five,
get.
eight.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and really, what I think we're finding out is the only way you can mobilize in local politics is
Yeah.
there has to be an overriding local issue that
Yeah.
raises the ire of the people that live in the area enough to get them organized and get them to the polls. For whatever reason, candidates do not seem to do that. At least most
Mhm.
candidates. Just a regular election. It's got to be something outrageous that just gets the community up in arms. It happened
Yeah.
in Tuesday in my old district
Right.
up in New York, where for the first time, you listen, everybody listen to this, city council race, the first time in 90 years that a Republican
Wow.
won. 90
Holy cow.
years. 90
Thank you,
years.
John. That's some good news.
90 years. It was the first time that a city council person had won from the Bronx, a Republican had won from the Bronx in 40 years. But they used to have what were called at-large districts, meaning that you would have a district and then you would have a couple of extras. So
Right.
there was a Republican that had won the couple of extra districts. Wasn't even a district; it was just an at-large. 40
Right.
years ago. But the last time someone won in that area was 90 years ago.
That's
And you
unbelievable.
know how they won? There was an issue in the neighborhood that's been going on for almost 2 years. And what they're trying to do in a lot of areas, and they're going to do it here, is called upzoning. What they do is they go around the city and change the zoning so they can build high-rise apartments in neighborhoods that are dominated by one or two or three family houses.
Gotcha.
And it completely changes the complexion of the neighborhood, obviously. And they don't have the infrastructure for it, yet they're going to go and build on top of a local supermarket an 8-story building, and then another one down the hill, and then another one down the block. And you're going to, all of a sudden, you're going to have another 60, 70,000 people in the neighborhood that just can't handle it.
Yeah.
So the incumbent Democrat city council person flip-flopped and supported the issue. Now, of course, all the
Mhm.
developers and all the lobbyists, a lot of
Are
money
behind
to
him.
her campaign. She outraised the
Yeah.
person that won like 10-1.
Wow.
But the neighborhood was up in arms over this one issue. And guess
Right.
what? That, along with going around and knocking on doors, which is the best way to win, they
Yep.
knocked on doors. And guess what? They won 53-47. And like I said, 90 years. I mean, I mean, the person that won, Christy Marmorato, she's a friend of mine. She was actually on national news Wednesday morning. National news. She was on Fox
Wow.
and Friends. I mean, not,
Well,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, 90 years. That's impressive. I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, but you see, my point is, it has to be like a single issue that will drive people to the polls. For whatever reason, candidates aren't doing it anymore, and
Mhm.
eventually, it's going to happen around here. There's going to be some building project that people are just going to be completely up in arms over. One that I think is going to happen is when people start to realize that when they redo this Inlet Square Mall over here in Merle's, which is
Mhm.
right by where I live, that
Right.
the initial planning has 2 hotels being built there. People are going to
Mhm.
fight that. People are going to fight that. I mean, that's what's
Yeah.
going to drive people to the polls. Do you support 2 hotels here?
Well,
We don't need
at least in
hotels.
the Merle's Inlet area. I don't know
We
if it'll
don't need
help the rest of
hotels
the
in
Orange
Merle's
County.
Inlet. I mean,
Right.
we have one now, and like I think I said this last time, I've been coming down here. Started coming down here 8 years ago, and I think in the 8 years that hotel has had 4 different names.
Right.
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 So it's not a place that does very well anyway,
Right.
and we're really not built for hotels. We're not.
Right.
And then of course the buried lead is during the off season, who's in the hotels? That's where they put. That's where they put illegals and homeless people,
Mhm.
and you know what? We don't need it. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're right, but I want to say this because I know at least one of the candidates that I was supporting, he did actually get a team of door knockers to go
Right.
out and knock. So that's why I want to make this point. And I've said this before. The statistics bear this out. This is not something I'm pulling out of the sky. This is not pie in the sky kind of stuff. This is statistically relevant information. They've done the studies, they've done the research because we've had more than a few elections to bear this out. Um, if you knock on the door and you are the candidate running for that office and you speak to the individual who they open the door and you speak to that voter, 1 out of 4 of those voters that you speak to are going to vote for you, the candidate. Now, if I'm running for office, John, and you go knock on the door on my behalf and you speak to that candidate, that voter, 1 out of 7 people are
Right.
going to vote for me because you spoke to them. If we knock on the door and nobody answers and we just leave a flyer, a little door hanger, whatever, palm card in the door, maybe some other material, you'll get 1 out of 14 people will vote for you. If you just mail mailers out, it's 1 out of 300. Now, those are statistics. I didn't make those up. I didn't make them up here. They did the research. I went to the Leadership Institute now, I think 3 times, and the numbers really have not changed very much that bear that out. So I kind of did some math on that because I know in the particular race that I'm thinking of, this candidate had door knockers and they knocked on 12,000 doors. So you got to imagine they didn't get every person to the door. But if you divide 12,000 by 1 out of 7, it was roughly a little over 1,700 votes is what you would expect for him to get. He got 1,600 votes, John. So
Right.
what does that tell you? Uh,
Yeah.
and
You got to
if
do
the
it yourself.
candidate had been the one knocking on
Right.
the door, he would have gotten 3,000 votes and he would have won.
Yeah. You
Um,
have to do it, and you have to be engaged.
yep.
It's a little different down here, obviously, than where I was coming from,
Yeah.
but there is no replacement for going out there personally
Yeah.
and doing things. What you have to, and not just, I mean, the door knocking is great too, but you also have
Mhm.
to, what you got to do? You got to get out to events. You got to get out to shopping malls. You
Mhm.
got to get out,
Yep.
uh, stand outside of church, whatever you got to do where there's a lot of
Yep.
people, and you got to
Yep.
engage. Can't just rely on TV and radio and whatever, and like you said, palm cards and flyers and mailings, and
Mhm.
you got to do it all together. But the most important thing, obviously, is to go knock on
Is
doors.
retail politics, shaking the
Yeah,
hands, speaking
yeah,
their language, answering their questions. And sometimes those questions are not going to be fluff. They're going to ask you some tough questions, and you better be
yeah,
prepared to answer. Or, as we are former educators both, if a student asked me a question, I did not know the answer to them, I would say, let me look that up. I'll get back to you, and then get back
absolutely
to
right.
them. Don't say you're going to get back to them and not, because they'll remember that. Well, she never came
Yeah.
back and answered that question. So make it a
That's
point.
even more
Yeah.
important than the people that are probably going to vote for you is to return the phone call or
Hmm.
to say I'll get back to you and get back to them. I think I've
Hmm.
mentioned this before. Um, President Kennedy was the best at that. He had more press conferences than every president has had since then combined.
Right.
He had a press
Right.
conference like every week but he was very good at it, and he wasn't afraid to say, "Okay, I know this. I know this. I'm not sure about this. Let me get back to you." And then he'd come back at the next conference the next week and say, "Oh yeah, about your question, this is what happened." He wasn't afraid to say he didn't know what he was going to check, and
Right.
people really, really respected that.
Yes.
It's that personal interaction. Now that was on TV and it was national and it was the president,
Sure.
but it's the same thing. As long as you
Hmm.
follow up, people are much more likely to respect what you're doing.
Well, in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and Linda, and she was telling me about Dennis DeSabato. That he was running. She was relatively new to the area, didn't really know who he was, and she had commented on, I think it was either on his page on social media or somewhere, that he saw it and said, "I don't know who this guy is. He's never darkened my door." And
Right.
she said a few hours later, knock, knock,
Showed
knock.
up and knock on the door.
She opened the
Yeah.
door. "Hi, I'm Dennis DeSabato." And she said, I was like, "Whoa." So she said, he got my vote.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that I believe is really important. And I think you'll agree with me on this. This is one of the reasons why I do fully understand why Donald Trump chooses not to debate. I get it. I get
Right.
it. But I also think that he kind of sets the stage for how other people they want to mimic him. They want to kind of be like Trump, if you will, in some ways, particularly candidates. So I don't think that's a good way to represent the people, because we already have that in a lot of situations where the incumbents just refuse to debate the first person running again, especially in a primary, because they don't want to, quote unquote, give them any stage or give them any time. Well, but they deserve it. You should have to address your voting record. You should have to answer questions about why you did what you did as a representative. And so I hope that maybe we get it narrowed down to there's the top three, Trump and two others. And then I hope he comes and debates. Because if he doesn't, this is my concern. My concern is if Trump does not debate at all in the primaries, that let's say he wins the primaries. Right now it looks like he's walking away with it. So I mean, yeah, look, again, I don't hide this. I'm a DeSantis supporter, but facts are facts. So if he does walk away with this nomination, I don't want the Biden administration, should they be the candidate, I don't want them to say, well, Trump never did any debate, so we're just not going to debate Trump.
Right. Well, I
So we're
don't.
not
Yeah,
going to
I
do
don't
it.
think Biden's going to debate anyway.
Right. So, but
Right.
I think he'll use that as well. You never debated in the primary, so therefore I'm not going to debate in the general. And I just think it sets a bad precedent all the way around. I think everybody running for office should. Now, I'm going to say this. I think we have too many debates at this point in time. I think it's almost. I didn't even watch last night. It's full disclosure.
Right.
I didn't even watch last night because I
Neither did
knew
I.
it wasn't going to change my opinion about who I thought was the better candidate. Um, Honestly, I'm Ron DeSantis, but if Donald Trump gets the nomination, I'm going to vote for the guy. I mean, I can't not vote. Really, I'm going to vote for Biden, and I'm not going to not vote. That's a vote, anyway. But I just think that we've got to get to a place where candidates are willing to debate on the issues. Now, it doesn't need to get personal. We don't need to, I'll give you an example, and I was debating on whether to pull this up and play it, but on Monday, there was a hearing to decide whether or not a judge, Jan Holmes, would be appointed or not. And of course, she went before the committee that you and I have talked about at length here, the JMSC, the Judicial Merits Selection Committee. And again, folks, I think John and I have made it very clear. Our position is that lawyer legislatures should not be picking the judges that they know they're going to be putting their cases before at some later date. That is highly inappropriate. It's such a conflict of interest that to me it's unethical. And then after seeing the way they handle themselves in these selection committee processes, I was appalled. They allow people to come and speak uh, for or against the candidate who's being considered for a judgeship. And these committee members were so rude and so callous. They interrupted their guests. They talked down to them. They, it was just bad. I was very, very unimpressed with their level of professionalism. So we need to fix that system. That all that did was motivate me to, yep, we need to fix it. And it
Yeah.
needs to start with replacing many of the folks that are currently on that committee serving. And of course, not the least of which is Luke Rankin. He's got to go. But all that, let me get back quickly. So I'm glad to hear that there was some benefit for the elections in New York, because here in the South, I just didn't see a lot of the
Yeah.
candidates who I thought were more conservative get in.
Well, part of, I mean, and you probably saw it today and yesterday, after an election day that did not go well yet again for the Republicans,
Yeah.
that there is a big hue and cry to get rid of Ronna McDaniel. Now,
Uh,
wherever you sit on the
yeah.
debates, the presidential debates, if you're going to have them, they
Mhm.
should have waited till after this election. I'm sorry, everybody said, well, I know the window's too small before the prime. I don't care. You should have focused on these local elections.
Yep.
You should have focused on getting out the vote. You should have focused on, like we said, door knocking,
Mhm.
registering voters, fundraising. Instead, you're staging these debates,
Mhm.
which, like I said, you can be for them or against them. They're staging these debates. They're spending a lot of money on these debates. They go to Miami or wherever they're going and they stay at the 4-star hotels and they spend tons of money,
Yeah.
and all of the people are in on it throwing money around, and you should be focusing on the local elections. That's
Yeah.
one. I mean, she's got to go. I'm sorry,
Yep.
she's got to go, and she could take McKissick with her.
Yep.
That is
Her co-chair.
one of the worst approaches that I've ever seen. And how many times are you going to let this woman lose? How many
Yeah.
times? I mean, you
Yeah.
expect some. I heard somebody say it last night. It's like you bring in your closer in a baseball game, right?
Mhm.
And every time that the closer comes in, they give up a grand slam and lose the game. And let's give her another contract. That's a great
Yeah.
idea.
And let's
Let's
give her a
sign her up again.
bonus.
How many times can you lose? We're supposed to have the red
Yeah.
wave, and they pick up what, 8 seats?
Four
Yeah,
seats, five
what,
seats.
five,
It was not much.
whatever.
Yeah.
But it was supposed to be 30, 40, 50.
Yeah.
There is no, and the other part of it is this, and you saw it in Virginia. The only reason Glenn Youngkin won the governorship is because MAGA got out and backed him. They
Yeah,
backed
and
him.
it was that one issue that you talked
Right.
about.
And
That it
yeah,
was
and
the parents being told you don't have a say
absolutely.
in your kids'
And
education.
MAGA stood up,
Education.
and
Yeah.
it was that single issue. It motivated
Yeah.
everybody to get out there.
Yep.
And then since then, he says, well, we need committees on this and bipartisan committees and everything. And guess what? MAGA stayed
Doesn't work.
home.
Yep.
MAGA stayed home, and the Democrats won the legislature.
Mhm.
When are they going to learn this? They're never going to learn it, because you know what? And I've heard a lot of people say this. If you're the national party, there's more money in losing.
Yeah.
There's more money
Yeah.
in losing, because you're going to raise money saying, look, we need to beat these people. Well, yeah, but it can't be every single year you need to beat these people.
I know.
Donald Trump won in 16, and I think he won in 20, in
Mhm.
spite of what was going on with the national party and in
Yep.
spite of what was going on in the congressional races. He wins anyway because he brings along with him like 30 million people. But the Republican Party needs somebody in place that is not going to ignore the America First part of the Republican Party, which now I think dominates the party. And they
Yeah.
say it's a minority part of the party. I really disagree with that.
Well, John, it's interesting because I like where you're going with that. And I think what we've had three debates so far.
Mm-hmm.
So we could have held all of those debates and had the first one, say November.
You can have it next
I don't know
week.
what's this coming weekend. This
Yeah,
weekend.
this week,
After
next
that,
week, whatever.
and then you could have another one at the end of November,
Yeah,
and then you could have one at the 1st of December. Because if I'm not mistaken, in the first presidential primary is in January. Is that in Nevada in
I think it's
January?
no, maybe end of January, beginning of February. Yeah. Well, the first one, the
No,
first
they were going to make it South Carolina. It was going to be February 4th.
February 4th, right?
But I think New
But
Hampshire
either way, there's a
found,
window there.
screw that. I think, yeah, exactly. So the point being that
There's a
you
window.
had an opportunity to have two or three of these debates before you got in there and, as you said, basically ignored the local races. And again, I feel like we're beating the dead horse, but I can't say it enough. Folks, it is important to pay attention to what happens at the local level, because those individuals end up going on to the state and to the federal offices. So if you don't know who they are here, you're definitely not going to know who they are there. Um,
Yeah,
and
what's the Republican message? I mean, you know where
right,
they got hammered all over the country on abortion, all over the
yeah,
country.
yep,
I mean, you finally got to the point where you got rid of Roe versus Wade, but their message as a national party is all over the place. It's all
hmm,
over the place. So, pick a message and run with it. That's all.
yep,
Case closed. If you want to make a national statement, you say, look, it's up to the states,
hmm,
but nationally, this is our focus. Nothing in the third trimester. Period. Period. Ban that, start there, and then work
yeah,
your way back. That's the national stance.
yeah,
Nothing, nothing, nothing
yeah.
in the
Because what
third
is it?
trimester.
85% agree with that position
Yes.
that in the third
Start there,
trimester
and
you
then
don't.
and then
Yeah,
anything else, hey, you defer to the states.
yeah,
But we need to nationally unify in the fact, and I've
hmm,
seen many, many, many obstetricians say that there is no, zero reason to have an abortion in the third trimester.
Right.
It's a
Right.
delivery prop. You do a cesarean. You
Yeah.
deliver the baby, and you tried. And now with the scientific advancements that we've made, you can keep a child alive. And if there's a major
Mhm.
medical problem, then you deal with the child after the child is born. That's it.
Right.
There is no legal reason, or no medical reason rather, to have
Right.
something third trimester. So start there. All right,
Yeah.
start there. And nationally, and I'm sure you've all seen this too, after 20 weeks, the overwhelming majority of the people in the country don't believe that abortion is
Yeah, I
proper.
think that's like
After 20,
70%,
yeah.
and then
So
when you get to
start
yeah,
there, and say,
27,
look,
30
and we'll
weeks is
defer to
yeah.
the states. Like here locally,
Mhm.
okay, it's good. Your 6 weeks heartbeat bill, good. That's what this state wants. Florida,
Mhm.
pretty much the same thing. Are there
Mhm.
other places that will not be the case, like Ohio, which is a
In
Republican state?
California,
Ohio voted to
I
have
know.
abortion on you can abortion on demand.
I can't believe it.
Right, but that's the whole idea. Where's the messaging? There is no messaging. There is
Mhm.
none. There's no messaging on Ukraine. There's no messaging on the border. You don't hear it. They were too worried about the primaries. They need one message and run on it. And it needs to be look. The message needs to be America first. Otherwise, guess what? America first people aren't turning out. Case closed.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So I just, I tried to walk away from that election night with something positive to take away. So I appreciate you telling me about the elections in New York because that might
Yeah.
be the only ray of sunshine that comes out of that. Um,
Yes, but
but
it turned out into it was really a single issue race. It's got to be
right,
something that raises the ire of the community, and people came out big time, and she won.
yeah, to me it is interesting that when I was talking to people at the campaign headquarters, if you will, at the night as the results were coming in, and once we realized that the candidate had not won, there's a lot of well, this is a dark day, and we don't, what's the point? The other side's going to win, and I even felt a little bit of myself. I was like, what am I doing? And then I thought, no, you know what? No, that's not the right attitude to have because that's the attitude the left wants us to have. They want us to surrender,
Mhm.
and I'm just not going to. I will go down fighting for what I believe in. I will go down fighting for what I believe the Father of all things, God, wants me to do, and I'm committed to moving forward in my campaign. And if it's God's will that I be elected, then no matter what I do or don't do, I will be elected.
Right.
So we have to accept sometimes the inevitability of we're human. We do what we can, but there have to be some steps that we take because it's just, like you said, you have to know what the issues are, and you have to do that retail politics. You got to go out there, shake the hands,
Mhm.
attend the events, and be present among the people that you're asking to support you, and don't try to hide in the basement
And just one more
unless
thing
you
about
have,
that. Yeah, one more thing
yeah,
about that New York election is that
yeah.
the percentage of registered Republicans in that district is 14%.
Wow. So I mean, she got a lot of Democrat votes.
Well, she got a lot of
Or
Democrat
yeah,
votes. Part of that was that issue that I talked about with the
right.
upzoning, and part of it is crime is off the hook up there. People are tired
Yeah,
of it. They
yeah.
don't care. Democrats don't like crime either. The
Mhm.
people, the working class Democrats, the union people, and everything, it all crossed over. So the registered Republicans in that district were 14%. The independents are in the 20s, and then a 61% Democrat, and she won 53-47.
Yeah. Now, what I was going to say is that unless you have that single issue or go out and do those retail politics, you can't hide in the basement unless maybe you're running for office in Maricopa County, as an example,
Right.
where if things happen like unannounced, they close down a polling place again, and you have all these irregularities occurring again. I think
Oh,
I
that's a
saw
mess
the
out
news,
there.
Maricopa County, Arizona, there were some issues in Pennsylvania, and other states. And I just think, at what point in time are we really going to, kind of get a handle on this and see what we can do to fix this
Yeah.
integrity issue that we have in our elections? And we do have the issue, John, and I think that plays into why people vote or don't vote. So I'm not terribly surprised that we didn't see a significant turnout of voters because, one, as you said, there was not a single issue that actually, galvanized the public to come and vote. And two, there were really no candidates, in my opinion, who were like so populist. And everybody's like, oh, I love this guy, I'm going to go vote for him or her. They're just fantastic. That didn't happen. And then three, people just said, what's the point in voting? Because my vote doesn't count. They're going to cheat. They're going to steal. They're going to do whatever. The votes don't, there's not any integrity in it. So I spoke to my mom and she said the same thing. She said, I'm so disparaged. She said that I just felt like, what's the point in voting? And she said, and then I thought, no, I've got to do my civic duty. And I said, yes, mom. I said, because if we don't vote, then they don't even have to cheat anymore.
Right. And then
Um,
you put the news on and you see that there were issues in Pennsylvania where one of the computerized voting machines was flipping votes.
yep, I saw
And
that.
they
Yep.
said, "Oh, that was a human error, software issue. Somebody programmed." Stop. I mean, stop. Well, guess what? If you get rid of the computers, you don't have that human error,
There you
right?
go.
And if you get rid of voting season, you're not going to have that issue either. I've said this many times, and I will say it forever. We need to get back to election day and not election season, and we need to get rid of computerized voting. I'm not against machine voting. Like I said, I voted on a machine most of my life,
Yeah,
but it was a tabulator. You just went in
right.
and pulled the toggle. That was it. And I never felt that my vote wasn't counted. Now, I don't trust the computer. I don't. Once I slide that sheet in, I'm like, who knows what's happening here? Who knows?
Hmm.
And until they get rid of and look, it's the Republican Party's fault. They're the ones that spawned. Oh, we need to expand this. We need to go to election weeks and election months. And look, have election day. And if you know you can't vote, just ask for an absentee ballot. That's it. Just ask for one because I have no problem with that. If you think you can't vote that day, and you file for it, you're filing for it, and
Hmm.
everybody knows who you are, and you
Hmm.
send it to them and they send it back and you have a ballot, that's great. But this mail just randomly mailing out ballots based on outdated voter rolls is the biggest problem that we have.
Yeah. So I hope that folks will, continue to pay attention to what's going on. I had several people within my neighborhood ask me, well, what candidate do I support? Where do I go vote? And I said, well, first of all, we're not within a municipality, so we don't vote. And second of all, so don't worry about the candidates. But if you are going to vote, typically we vote at either Forest Brook Baptist or Forest Brook Elementary. That's where the votes are done for our neighborhood. But you know what? Even though they didn't know, I'm just glad they were asking the question
Right.
because they knew there was an election. They said, "I want to be a part of it if there's an election." So thank God for that. At least they were at least asking the question. So and there weren't a lot. It was only about 2 or 3 people. And again, I want to mention that I live in a neighborhood of over 1,000 homes now. So when you only get 1 or 2 people asking out of 1,000, that's pretty pathetic.
Yeah, and the other thing too about this, long-term voting, if you're in a voting season, is that
Yeah,
you don't vote in the place that you normally vote. There's a lot
yeah,
like there's usually one place. Well, to me, that adds to the possibility of more fraud also,
yeah,
because things are laying around. It takes a long time, but you need election day, one place, your neighborhood, and people vote. I mean, you got to make it easy, and that's what the easy is local. It's not okay. We'll give it 3 weeks, but you got to drive over here,
yeah.
right? People
I,
people
I,
aren't coming.
Is it 2 weeks that we get here in
I think
Horry
it's
County?
two
I think it's
here.
2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I voted early. I voted early in person, and it was at the Carolina Forest, Community Library is where they have it. Now I think there's more than one location. I think there are 3 locations to vote early in Horry County.
Yeah, I
Um,
have a big problem with all of that. With all of it.
yeah,
It should be in your neighborhood, like I said, in your neighborhood. People know who you are. People are expecting to see you, and you should be adding polling places, not getting rid of polling places. You should be adding polling places to get
yeah,
people to come. And people at the polling place that work there every election, they know you.
yeah.
Somebody walks in that
Well,
doesn't
I
belong, they
guess
know it.
right. I guess my position on that is this. If I have to choose between letting people just mail in a ballot or go stuff one into a ballot box, or they have to go into a voting place with their ID and show a picture to get a ballot and then vote in person, I'd prefer the in person. So until we get rid of the anybody can get a ballot and go stuff it in a box somewhere, then I opt for early voting. And as long, folks, hear me on this, as long as early voting is an option, you better do it
Yeah.
because that's what the Democrats do, and that's how they're winning right now because they're anticipating that something's going to come up. You're going to forget. You're going to get busy. Somebody's going to be sick. Your car's going to be out of gas. I mean, whatever on election day, and so your vote's not
Yeah.
going to get counted because you don't
And
vote.
and we know nothing's going to change for 2024. We
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
the Democrats are going to be out ballot harvesting. And
yep.
we know that so guess what? The Republican Party needed to focus all of its efforts
Hmm.
on getting out the vote and ballot harvesting. Look,
Oh,
unfortunately
back to Ron.
you have to play the game because
Yes,
they're playing it. And until we change the game, you still have to play with the rules that are in place. So you
that's
see
right.
somebody like Scott Pressler out there by himself, pretty much
Hmm.
out there and getting people to, register and
Yep.
just stirring up interest and getting people involved. And that's what the Republican Party should be doing all over the country.
Yep.
Instead, he's out there like the lone wolf, and they're worried about debates that did not have to take place.
Yeah.
At least, whether you're for them or against them, they could have done them after the election
Yeah.
for sure. And you're focusing all your efforts on this national
Mhm.
debate of people who, let's face it, nobody on that stage is by some polling measures in double digits. They're not even,
Well, let me
that, I
let
mean,
me
that could
say
change.
this.
That could
I
change, but
did
you could have
yeah.
waited. They could have
Did
waited.
you hear this from our own South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, the candidate? I listen. I thought to myself, of all the people to make this comment, you are the last guy that should make this comment. He said, now this again, I didn't watch the debate, but I saw this in quotes in various places on Facebook and in the news. He alleged that Donald Trump was unelectable, and I'm like, really, Tim? You almost didn't make the debate because you didn't qualify.
Right. I know.
Are you kidding me? Holy
And
cow.
just and the
Oh,
I just not taking
oh
a
wow.
personal shot at anybody that's on the stage,
Right.
but the bar is pretty low there. You need 70,000
Individual
individual donations
donations,
to
yeah.
qualify. When I ran for Congress, I had 250,000 individual donations
Mhm.
in a local
Yeah,
race. So 70,000, you can't get 70,000 people in a nation of 330 million.
yeah. I
You
think
can't
it
get
should be
70,000 to, oh, please. It's
300,000 individual
it's got to
donations,
be, yeah. You know what? It really, it's to set the bar on any of that. There's just too many people up there.
or at least 100,000,
Yeah.
150,000. It shouldn't be
It's got,
70,000, but
yes. I mean,
yeah,
70,000. I mean, come on.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, anyway, I just thought that was interesting. I didn't watch the debate. I didn't watch Trump's rally either because, I mean, honestly, at this point in
And,
time, you've already made up your
yeah.
mind.
And,
I
and,
don't see anything happening substantial in these debates that's gonna change
and
my position.
how
So,
can you watch the news and read the polls? I mean, I don't trust
yeah,
polls necessarily,
yeah.
but there isn't one that I've seen that
Mhm.
has President Trump behind Joe Biden.
Yeah,
There's a
not at
couple
this
of,
time. Yeah,
no,
he's
not
blocking him
now.
pretty good. Yeah,
It's not happening. So I don't know why Senator Scott would say that he's
I don't either.
unelectable. But you know what? Um, he's not going to go anywhere. He's not going to get any traction. We know that. And then this is his last term, right? He said
Yeah,
he's going to, after this he's
not gonna
done,
run again.
and then he'll go be, I don't know,
Well,
probably be on TV or something.
I mean, what I'll say is that he is done. He's not gonna be president. He's not gonna be vice president. I mean, Trump might put him on some kind of a cabinet position. That's a
He
possibility.
could.
Um, I don't really think he's terribly smart. I mean, I'm not trying to be ugly. I just don't think that he has some particular expertise in an area that I think, oh, well, we could really use him on. Like, for example, Trey Gowdy. I think Trey Gowdy is a very smart guy. He'd be a brilliant attorney general. I mean, he would be. He'd be really good at that. I can't say that about Tim Scott. I don't know where he really has something that nobody else could trump. I hate to
Right.
use that word trump, but
Probably,
yeah,
I would think, I mean, his legislation, his big piece of legislation, right, was the urban enterprise zones, right?
yeah,
Um, which, maybe you get him into that end of it, housing and
yeah,
urban development, stuff like that. And I
yeah,
always think that was a great idea.
yeah,
And who actually started all of that was Nixon.
yeah.
Nixon was the first person to do that, was to give, suggest giving tax breaks to people who go into low income areas and build companies
Mhm.
that provide jobs for locals,
Yeah,
not shipping people in, locals.
yeah,
That
yeah.
was, that was Nixon's idea. I mean, that's going back. So, but it's a great
Yeah.
idea, and if that's his area of expertise and he can help out, that's great. I'm all for putting
Sure.
people in place that are qualified, not like this regime that's in there now, where
Mhm.
they fill cabinet positions with friends and people who aren't eminently qualified to do anything.
Oh,
I mean,
but their
I mean,
DEI,
yes,
they
that's the
fit that
whole. That's
bill.
right. That's for sure. You know,
Diversity, equity, and inclusion.
right?
They're
Like,
gay,
yeah,
transgender, non-binary, something.
yeah, Mayor Pete.
Yeah, Mayor Pete, or what was the guy, the Sam guy that got caught
Oh
stealing
God, yeah,
suitcases? Or
yeah.
the what's the other guy that's cross-dressing
Or
one?
even
The
Jean Pierre. I mean, come on.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a whole list of it. It's absurd. So yeah, I think that is
Mayor
problem, but
Pete was the failed governor of a small town, South Bend,
yeah,
Indiana. He was the
yeah,
failed mayor, rather, failed mayor
Hail
of a
Mary,
small
yeah,
town,
not a governor, yeah.
failed mayor of a small town, and
Mhm.
and then you put him in charge of Department of Transportation. And look, if there's one thing where the wheels have really come off, it's the Department of Transportation. I
Oh
mean,
my god, that's
transportation in this country
literally
is a disaster.
yeah,
And yeah, and I said that on purpose. The wheels have come
yeah,
off of
yeah.
everything. The airline industry is
Mhm,
a mess. Amtrak loses money like
mhm.
Amtrak is typical about the government. Amtrak is a monopoly that loses money. I mean, you got to
Isn't
be
that
pretty
sad?
screwed up to do that, right? If you're a monopoly, you
Yeah.
should be doing really, really well. They're a
Yep.
monopoly that loses money and they're going to spend they're going to front them another $16 billion or something to straighten Amtrak out. Come on.
Yeah.
It has such a bad reputation. It really does. I mean, I took it to Washington a couple of times, and if you catch it on a good day, it's pretty good. But
Right.
the tracks are antiquated. I
Mm.
remember one time, not to get too off the subject, my parents were doing that auto train thing. It's a long time ago. They were doing that auto train thing. You take the train to Washington to Florida. So they didn't, and they were coming back, and you could put your car on the train. So you put your car
Oh,
on the train. So my parents only had to drive to Washington instead of driving from New York to Florida. You
right.
drive down to Washington, right out in Virginia, right outside Washington. You put your car on the train, and then they take you the rest of the way, and then the same thing on the way back. So on the way back to New York from Florida, there was a derailment, and they had to, not with their train, with another train.
Oh,
They had to back up 5 hours in
jeez.
reverse at like 8 miles, really slowly, 5 hours
Oh,
to get to the split where they could get back. Yeah. So the trip ended up taking a couple of days instead of,
oh.
whatever it was, 20 hours. And then they had to drive from Washington to New York. But that's
Well,
just
nothing's changed since then, John.
no,
Amtrak's
not a,
still pretty
not a,
much the same way.
yeah, not a thing.
Oh,
And
wow.
they keep throwing,
Yeah.
good money after bad. And like I
Hmm.
said, only the government could have a monopoly that loses money.
Yeah, which again, I like what you said about Tim Scott and the idea that Nixon obviously introduced that we
Yeah.
give money to local urban areas to
Yeah.
build businesses and hire jobs. To that end, I'm going to go back to something we've talked about numerous times here, and that is the 1.3 billion dollars given to VW Scout, a company from Germany, here in South Carolina. And this is, again, we talked about it last time, and I did the math on it, and if we divided, $50,000, that would go to 27,000 small businesses. There are 463,549 small businesses in South Carolina. So if you just divided it by that number, each business would get $2,804. Um, if you divided it out by $10,000, that's 130,000 businesses that would get a $10,000 free check, if you will. If you did $25,000, that's 52,000 businesses that would get a check to. I mean, we've talked the number of jobs that would be added
Yeah.
if you were
Well,
to do it that way and plus of all, it would be wasn't right now it's just Blythewood, so it's just one small segment
right.
of South Carolina. If
Right.
you did it the other way that you're talking about, that's going to be job creation across the
Well, across the
state of
state.
South Carolina.
Now, what we saying? 27,000 small businesses would get 50,000 apiece, right?
Yes.
To me, that creates 54,000 jobs.
Yep.
With that 50,000, you could probably hire two people, at
Yep.
least, at least
I
part
know I
time,
could. I
at
know
least,
I could.
yeah, at least part. Maybe not 40 hours a week, maybe 30, maybe
Yep.
25. But you're creating jobs and you're growing the tax base. Now that's 54,000 jobs.
Mhm.
And Volkswagen Scout is creating how many jobs? They're all local, and they're bringing in a lot of people from Germany to take them. So take your pick. Take your
Yeah.
pick. The government's job is not to pick winners and losers,
Yep.
and they're not good at it. That's that they have proven that time and again, whether it's state, whether it's federal, they are not good at it. And the reason they're not good at it is they're usually looking to uh, grease the palms of friends of theirs, or vice versa. They're trying to help friends out, but financially, go back and look at Solyndra. You throw all of this money around, and people are going to donate to your campaigns or whatever. But just think about that, folks. And Shannon hit it right on the head. $50,000 to 27,000 small businesses creates 54,000 jobs. That's 25,000 per job.
I mean, that's
Case
I don't
closed.
even know. Yeah, yeah,
50,
yeah,
that's
literally.
50. That's 54,000 jobs. Is a lot. That's a lot of jobs. I know they're not high-paying jobs, and they're not, but still, it's helping the economy. It's helping people out locally, and you're getting people on the tax rolls instead of keeping them off the tax rolls.
Right,
That's the whole
exactly.
idea. That's the whole
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. I find it. I don't. I mean, I don't know who's really getting the money of this because I have to wonder. All right, where does this money? Who? What are the representatives from that particular district? One, who are the state senators, the state house reps that actually represent the area that's going to benefit from this the most, and how much of that money that they're sending there is going to somehow mysteriously circular reason back into their pockets? That's kind of what I want to know. That's really what I want to know.
Right.
So,
And what are they going to do when they find out that the energy costs here over the next decade or so are going to skyrocket? What are they going to do? Like I
yeah,
said, Duke Energy, we've talked about this how many years? 15-year, how many times? 15-year plan to spend $130 billion, Duke Energy, to switch over to solar and wind predominantly to try to get away from fossil fuels. Well, first of all, it's not going to work. Second of all, where's that 130 billion coming from? Ratepayers.
Yeah.
It's coming from
Yeah.
ratepayers. And the
Yeah.
reason, we've talked about this many times, the reason that companies come here, they like the people that work here. The workforce is attractive to them, but usually the biggest reason, and there are actually states that have better tax rates, lower tax rates. What they like about South Carolina is consistently they have low energy costs. Period. That's why they
Yeah.
come, and it's a good spot. Weather's pretty
Yeah.
good. And that's why they come here. So now you're going to erase that too. But this whole idea of the government picking winners and losers, um, it never works. It never works. So I'd much rather see something like those urban enterprise zones or whatever. Just go into areas that are low income areas and say, okay, here, business owners, here's $50,000. See what you can do with it.
Yeah.
Turn it
You
into
know,
some jobs.
Yeah, and again, I think a lot of that plays into this whole idea of, as I said before, the diversity, equity, inclusion. And I saw yesterday, and I watched the five every now and again, and Greg Gutfeld was talking about why it's not really a case of equality. Equity and equality are not the same thing.
Two
You
different
sometimes
things.
think, because here's what they're saying with equality. Equality is you get an opportunity to get an education. I get an opportunity to get an education. We get our educations, and then we can both go apply for the same exact job. Okay. Now we have equal opportunity because we both get to apply. They're not going to say, I'm sorry, you can't even apply because you're a female or you're white, or you're a male and you're white. You can't even apply. We both have the opportunity to apply. Okay. That is equality. Equity is where they say, well, everybody can't be in that position, so nobody can be in that position. So you all have to go work at McDonald's, and everybody has to be a frontline person. That's equity. That's what
Right.
equity does, guys. It doesn't raise you up; it brings you down.
It makes people, it
Uh,
tries to make people the same.
the same, and
And
you
guess what?
cannot be the same.
We're not the same.
Yeah, no, I don't have the intellectual capacity of a Steve Jobs or an Einstein. I just don't. I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not a rocket scientist. You do not want me to try to develop a nuclear warhead. It will end horribly, probably with my death and possibly with many other people around me. So God gives us each differently. And so I think that's important to bear in mind. So to that end, I want to pull up something that I think is going to be interesting to folks. It is someone who professes to believe in all of this nonsense. If you've ever listened to Dennis Prager, he's the guy you ought to listen to. Hang on one second. Let me see.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah.
Of reparations in the world that you can pay us. And so you think because you write a check or you slide me something in Venmo that you're absolved, and you can tell somebody, well, I gave Dr. Blay $100. I'm not racist. Dr. Blay is going to spend your $100 and still tell you that you're racist. Thank you.
That's awesome.
Now,
Joke's on her, because I'm white, I'm not giving her money, and I still don't feel guilty. That was Professor Yaba Blay, and unsurprisingly, she is taught at several universities across this country. This video is a perfect example of why you never try to appease the woke social justice warriors. No matter what you concede, no matter what you give up, no matter how many reparations you give, these people see themselves as entitled and as victims, and out of the horse's mouth, it will never be enough.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that says it all.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And we the people and the government, they've never addressed the issue. I mean, they tried affirmative action, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? Far too often programs are judged on what the idea was rather than what the actual outcome was. That happens far too often
Oh,
in this
yes,
country.
yes.
Far too often.
Yeah.
So here you go back to affirmative action. You're going on 60 years now. 60 years.
Mhm.
And what is the problem in this country is that far too many people of color are stuck in failing public school systems, and they've never addressed the issue. The family as a unit has been completely undermined,
It's been
particularly in
decimated.
communities of
Yeah.
color, completely decimated. And everybody else, look at what was right. We're right behind, right?
Yep.
We're right behind them. And they did that to me. They did that on purpose. They did it
Yeah.
on
Oh,
purpose.
absolutely.
They say,
That was
here's
part of the
affirmative action.
plan.
Look, yeah, we're
Yeah.
gonna promote you, even though you can't read, write anything.
Mhm.
We're gonna promote you, social promotion. I'm gonna
Yeah.
push you to the top, and then you're gonna graduate from high school, and then you can't get into a college. and they're going to give you money to go to college, even though you probably shouldn't be in college, and you end up in
Mhm.
community college, and you're taking remedial reading and remedial math in
Mhm.
community college because you didn't learn anything in the
In
public
high
school
school.
systems that
Yeah.
you were in. And then guess what? When it comes time to go to 4-year college, when you finally caught up, you're out of money. You're
Mhm.
out of money. And where are you with your associate's degree? You're probably stuck. But we've never addressed the issue of why the schools fail. In New York City, I heard this yesterday, it just blew my mind. Now, I've been down here 3 years, going on 3 years. New York City, they spend $38,000 per pupil in high school. 38,000 per pupil.
Wow.
38,000. And the percentage of people that read and or that do science and math or whatever, especially math,
The STEM.
at
Yeah.
grade level is abysmal. I mean, amongst African Americans and Hispanics, it's in the 20s and 30s. And you're spending $38,000. Well, that money never reaches the kids. It
Right.
never reaches the kids. So what does the left do? They attack charter schools. They attack school voucher programs. They attack any opportunity that people who are stuck in failing school districts, they attack the opportunities. They're going to get these kids out of the district. Give them an opportunity. I mean, it's one of the things I ran on. And that's what needs to be addressed, yet they'll never address it, mostly because the teachers union control all of these places.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And, the other thing is, I noticed that I looked at, I think, New York, New Jersey, California, some of these other states, their superintendents make anywhere from 250,000 a year to 400,000 a year. Some of them make more than the president
Yeah. Oh,
of
yeah.
the United States. And I thought,
They make
wow. So
way
that's where that money is going to. More than
more than the mayor. Oh yeah, in New York City,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the onion. Peel the onion, there's
Yeah.
more onion.
Yeah.
It's endless. The bureaucracy, the waste of money. I mean, I have friends that have been teaching in public school, and they make great money. I mean, great. They make six figures. You got 10 years there. You're making six figures. Guess what? They're spending 38,000 a kid, and they end up buying supplies for the kids.
Well,
They end up
I
buying
spoke.
supplies. There's no supplies in the classroom.
Right.
There's nothing,
Yeah.
and the teachers end up buying stuff. Outrageous, absolutely outrageous.
Yeah. I
38.
mean, that's what I did. That's
And
what I did here.
the school that I worked at,
Yeah.
tuition's $8,000.
Wow. Yeah.
8,000, 38,000. And guess
Yeah.
what? We were graduating 99% of our kids with a full Regents diploma in 4 years and 100% acceptance to college. Same kids.
Right.
Same kids. So
Right.
it's not a racial ethnic issue. Kids are smart. If you put them in a position where they can learn, guess what? Kids want to learn.
They
Period.
will learn. You're absolutely
They
right.
have to
You
be in the right.
put
It's
them
all
in an
about environment.
Put them in an actual safe environment, not a safe from some hurtful
Yeah.
words or whatever, but an actual safe environment where they feel like they
All
can
about it.
sit
And
learn.
one
Yeah.
more thing, and I always talk about this. There needs to be a push all over the country where you have high schools in particular that are not co-ed, that is single sex, that you have all
Yeah.
boys schools and all girls schools. I know that people hate this idea, but trust me when I tell you, first of all, boys need to be boys. Right? Teaching boys is not the same as teaching girls. And unfortunately, our education system is dominated by women who think that boys should act like girls. That's just a fact.
Mhm.
It's a fact. And boys need to belong to something. Boys need that camaraderie. At least the overwhelming majority of boys do. They feel that they need that camaraderie. They need something to grab onto. A lot of them lack a male role model. And it just works. You have to trust me on this. I did it for 22 years. The other part of it is that there is far less bullying in an all-boys school than there is in a co-ed school. I know people find that hard to believe, but it's
No,
a
it
fact
actually makes perfect
because
sense.
the boys
Not
get into this.
competing
Yeah, the
with
boys are in
girls or
a
whatever.
it's a fraternity, and guys start to look out for each other. Is there some bullying? Yeah, but usually the kids straighten it out themselves. And if you're thinking that I taught in some prep school, I did not teach in a prep school. I taught in a school where 40% of the kids lived in the poorest congressional district in the United States. We were 88% minority, 56% single family. All right. And there was less bullying there. Boys need to belong, and boys are not girls. They can't be taught the same. They need gym as often as possible. They need to blow off energy. You need to approach them differently. You need to engage them. Really, truth be told, when you're teaching all boys, you need to put on a show. It's even more so than when you're doing co-ed. It's like doing a stand-up routine. I used to tell people, and I'd get out of work, I'd be exhausted because I would do 5 40-minute stand-ups. It was like if you were a comedian in Las Vegas, you 5 40-minute stand-ups, you'd be wiped. And that's what it is. You got to
They
sing.
only do like 10 or 15 minutes usually.
They want a show. That's what they want. And hey, good. So put on the show. But that's something I would like to see locally here. Is I'd really like to see somebody, whether it's a religious school or a charter school, just get in there heavy and go single sex and have an all boys high school and see how it goes. Just see how it goes. I'm telling you, that's where it's at, especially for young men who want to go forward. You're preparing them, especially socially. You say, "Well, they're not socializing with girls." They have plenty of time to socialize with girls.
Mhm.
Trust me, when you get out of school, you will find the girls if you want. But that interaction with other guys is completely different. And you know what? Every kid finds his spot. Every kid finds his spot. It's just the
Yeah.
way it works. You have the athletes, you have the students, you have the artists, you have the musicians, and they
Right.
all come together and they support each other. I mean, are there a few knuckleheads? Always a few knuckleheads. There's always knuckleheads. But that's something that needs to be looked at here in the state of South Carolina. Somebody needs to get in, these charter schools are a great idea, but somebody needs to try to see what happens with an all boys school and an all girls school.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to at least see the research on it, because I think
Yeah.
there are enough schools that are, all boy, all girl schools, that we could certainly do some
Sure.
analysis to see. Especially, I like the fact that your school's not a preparatory school. It is, it's just a Christian Catholic school that
Yeah.
allows, and what would you say, 80% were
88,
minorities?
88%. And we were
And-
only 56%. I don't even know if we were 50% Catholic when I left.
Right.
I don't
Right.
think
So,
so.
but it was a
Yeah.
Catholic run school, but you
Right,
didn't have
and
to
you
be
had
Catholic to
to, and
attend.
you had
Yeah,
to
yeah,
take
sure.
you had to take religion.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and 4 times a year we went to mass as a school. So even
Yeah.
the non-Catholic kids would go to school. I mean, go to
Yeah.
church rather, and they go sit through
Right.
mass. Some of them didn't like it, but they got it because it was part of the camaraderie. And just to prove that out, the camaraderie issue,
Yeah.
the most successful alumni associations for high school alumni associations
Mhm.
across the country are all boys high schools.
Wow.
Guys
Yeah.
keep in touch with their high school
I can
more
see
so
that.
than any other group.
Yeah. I can see that. Yeah, so I mean, I think that's a great way to look at maybe improving education, and maybe even especially improving it in areas where they are um, dealing with
Yeah,
socioeconomic issues
and we
of
need
an
men.
extreme nature. Yeah,
We need men.
we do. We do need men.
Manly
And
men.
to that end, I would say we need to have men teaching the men.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. And
and women teaching the women. So
I
yeah,
think men would be far more
but
likely to get involved in the teaching profession if they were
John,
teaching just guys.
we are being bigots because we are not accepting that there are like 978 different genders now.
Right.
You could be a spirit animal, apparently. And so,
Right. And
no.
and you're coming off
For the record, there are two. There's a male. There's a female.
toxic masculinity. Right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
all they tell
exactly.
you is toxic
Yeah,
masculinity. But look, we need masculine men. You need men. That's the way it works. You just need it. As far as, if you want to get into that whole issue with gay students, we had gay students.
right,
And the kids didn't care. Most of the kids
right,
have people in the family who are gay. We're not in
right,
there having it's not in there about dating. It's about getting an
right.
education. And guys
Exactly.
knew, and they would look out for each other. If somebody was being picked on for that reason, the students would either address it or they would tell a member of the faculty or one of the counselors and say, "Hey, this guy's getting a hard time," and they took care of it right away.
Yeah,
But the further along we went, the less it became an issue.
right.
I'll be honest with you, there was more bullying in that school when I went there, and it wasn't sexual orientation based or anything. It was just we just broke chops all the time on each other.
Yeah,
It was constant. But there was more bullying then than now. You would think it would be
yeah.
the other way, but we were rough and tumble guys, whatever So
Yeah, and you're right. That is, I mean, I have a son, and I've got more nephews than I do nieces, and so I have seen that there is a difference and it's not in how we raise them. They're just made. God created us
we were different.
differently,
Yeah.
and that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. I don't think it is in my nature to want to go out and grab guns and go off into war. It's not something that I'm like, yeah, But most guys are much more. I remember being in college when the first Gulf War started out, and there were a couple of male students in there, and I'm watching it thinking, "Oh, this is so terrible." Our soldiers are going over there, and some of them are going to die. I look over my shoulder, and the guy's like, "Yeah, man, I'm joining." And I'm like, "What is wrong with you?"
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a difference.
It's different.
Yeah,
It's different. And we produced guys who went in the military, and we produced a tremendous amount over the history of that school, a tremendous amount of men of service.
Yeah.
Police department, fire department, doctors, lawyers, people who wanted to serve the greater community. That's who they are. To the point where a guy who graduated the year after me was chief of the department of New York City Police Department, 36,000 guys. And I have a lot of students that I taught who have gone very far up the ladder in the New York City Police Department and in the fire department. But they produce people who serve. And the reason is, one, we preach that because, we we always preach that, it's not about you. You were put on this earth to
Yes.
serve
To
others. That's
serve.
why you're here
Right.
in the first place, which is a great message in any
Yep.
school, whether it's religious or not, that you're put here to
Exactly.
serve others. But everybody says, oh, that's too religious. But guys they just get that. When you get that camaraderie, you start to feel like that about everybody. I just want to
Yeah.
help. I just want to help people. I want to watch out for people. I want to take care of people. And it trust me, it works. And I'm hoping that,
Yeah.
somebody in the education system, I'd love to talk to Ellen Weaver about it and say, what do you think about this? I mean, it's
Yeah.
just, it just, trust me, it works. And I'd love to see, we have a lot of issues here in South Carolina as far as education is concerned, and they're always looking for a way to pick up the scores and the production of the schools. Maybe try this, see what happens. I mean, I'd be very curious to see how many unisex schools there are in this state, even
Mhm.
Catholic schools, because a lot of the Catholic schools that were unisex had to go
Co-ed to survive.
co-ed just because of a lack of, yeah.
Yeah. I was in the service in the Navy in '92 when they actually had the first co-ed boot camp group, and I was in that. So
Right.
looking back at it, I can actually say I think that was probably one of the first steps in the wrong direction that the military took. They should have continued to have it be women in one area, men in the other area, not try to combine them for obvious reasons. And of course, without surprise, one of our commanding officers was, or actually not commanding officer, what do we call them? Company chiefs. He was removed because he had sex with one of the female recruits. So, you were sort of remove that
Right.
as an opportunity when you don't have that. That's just one thing. And then, of course, we can see it has spiraled considerably downhill from there. So I think that we need to really look into what you're saying. I like what you're saying. I think, speaking to Ellen Weaver about that as a possibility. And again, we're not pie in the sky. Let's look up the stats. The stats will bear it out. And I think that
Yeah.
there is probably a good, solid argument for having schools not be co-ed and having them be divided by, boys schools, girls schools.
Yeah, and it's not for everybody, and I'm not
Right.
saying that it should be for everybody, and I'm not
Right.
against co-ed schools. I'm just saying there is a place for this,
Sure.
and there are a lot of young men who respond better to it. They're
Right.
not worried about impressing people. You don't really
Hmm.
have to. I mean, there's a uniform, so you don't have to worry about what you're wearing to school. There's no pressure. Oh, I got these sneakers, and you don't have them. There's none of that
Right.
exists. You're all wearing the same clothes. You go in there, you find your spot. There's all sorts of clubs and activities. If you're a music guy, an art guy, if you're an athlete, whatever it is, you'll find it. And always, always, always there's service programs. So after, before school, after school, during school, you go out and do something in the community. Our guys used to go out and clean up parks, and it did all sorts of things. And that builds the camaraderie as well. But
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of young men who would just learn better in that environment. Like you said, there's fewer distractions and less pressure.
Yeah. I think about the alternative high schools that they create for students who have, discipline problems or whatever the
Yeah,
issues may be. And I think in some way it might actually be more beneficial to have those alternative schools be, all boy, all girl, and then they don't have to be military to the core. But I think having those students wear uniforms and not have to compete with, as you said, this guy's got a pair of Nikes that cost $250. Meanwhile, he's wearing a pair of tennis shoes he got at Walmart.
right.
Um, I think that would
Not an issue,
help
right?
to lower that temperature a little bit about that concern and let them focus more on just learning as opposed to trying to look good or be cool or whatever. Because there's way too much energy spent in schools on those issues, and
Yeah,
I'm so thankful for my son. I'm gonna brag a little bit on him.
yeah,
He doesn't care about that kind of stuff. I mean, we financially have been blessed. We could certainly purchase him whatever he wanted. He doesn't care. He'd wear the
right.
same shoes forever if I didn't make him wear a different pair. So he's not really stuck on
Yeah,
that. Now we do send him to a private Christian school, but that's because I know what the public schools teach, having taught there myself, and I don't want him to be indoctrinated. So he goes to a Christian school.
yeah, and in bringing this up in the environment that we're in now, where, like you said, they're preaching that there's 42 genders or whatever it is,
Right.
people will look at it and say, "Oh my God, that's an awful idea. You're going to exclude people and everything." We're not excluding anybody. We're
Right.
just trying to find a way to help young men who need an opportunity to succeed in an environment that is right for them. And
Right.
like I said, I've seen that with so many young men, especially in our school. You'd have guys that went to co-ed school and then They transferred out and came to us, and they go, "Man, I should have come here." And for me, it was too big. It was too many girls. There was too much going on. It was too cliquey. It was, I couldn't find my spot, and I came here and I felt like I was at home. Yeah, because you like the idea of camaraderie. Hey, look, you can look at it any way you want. That's why there's gangs in the United States. That's why there's gangs everywhere. There's guys who feel like they need to belong to something, and very often it goes in the wrong direction. It goes to a negative, and you end up in a gang or whatever. And instead, the school fills it fills that void for a lot of people, especially when they're lacking with male role models.
Yeah. And I think if I'm going to spend, $38,000 per student, I would rather it be that we're buying them uniforms, shoes, and particular uniform they're wearing, and we're feeding them meals so that they come to school dressed and they don't feel like they're, wearing the same thing they wore yesterday, because everybody's wearing the same thing they wore yesterday.
Everybody's wearing the same thing.
Everybody's wearing the same thing. And, we know they're getting fed. I do see the advantages of that. So, folks, and we've kind of been all over the page today talking about elections, and elections have consequences, and debates, and judicial systems and thought processes that people have about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. At the end of the day, please make yourself as informed as possible. Read, listen. There's some great podcasts out there with some really, really intelligent folks, and I don't claim to be one of the most intelligent people, because I'm not. But I do try to read a good bit, and I do try to bring what I read and discover to you guys, and I appreciate your time for listening. So just know that our next big political election is, of course, in February, and we're Republicans. I don't hide that. So that will be the presidential primary here in South Carolina, February 24th. And then after that, the next major primary will be, of course, for all of the state house, state senate, Congress, things like that. Those seats are up every 2 years. So those elections will be held June 11th. And so, as I've noted, I am running. I've already put my hat in the ring. I'm running for South Carolina House District 61 because we need an actual Republican, an actual conservative to serve in Horry County and for this district. So, and I'm hoping that we're going to have a lot more folks, John, that want to throw their hat in the ring and actually make a change in our state and our county. And I hope that John is one of those.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. One thing I'd like to bring up real quick before we go, maybe we'll talk about it next time. They're always looking for a place to cut taxes and stuff at the state level. We have too much money and everything. Here's what I think they should do. Eliminate the tax on pet food. There's a lot of people who are struggling. They have cats, they have dogs. You have animals in the house. I have animals in the house. It really, 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 pet food has gone through the roof. And eventually what ends up happening is people abandon their animals, and who picks up the slack? The state has to pay for that.
Yeah.
So in the long run, it'll probably be a wash. But that money coming out of people's pockets, when you go spend $50, $60, $70 on pet food, and then you got another almost 9% tax going on that really hurts, and it gets expensive. Vet bills are extremely expensive, as you know. It's expensive to have pets. Everybody likes to have pets, so make it a little easier to have a pet and get rid of the. How much are they making on that? Probably a lot, but certainly when you're looking at targeted tax cuts, I think that would be a good one. And eventually, like I said, the state ends up picking up the slack anyway for ASPCAs or whatever you're going to have. The state ends up having some sort of program to get rid of all these abandoned animals, and we pay for it anyway. So something to think about.
Yeah, I agree with you. And on that note, I hate to say this, but let's throw this out here too. A lot of times, because the economy is bad and groceries are expensive, there are people who actually have to turn to
eat the food, right?
Pet food.
Although now that pet food's gotten so expensive, I don't know. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. It costs as much as human food, if you will. But
go get some chicken cutlets; it's cheaper.
So, folks, please get involved. If you're not in a position where you can run for office, or you can afford to run for office, and really, honestly, you can't afford not to. And don't believe. I'm going to say this, and this is going to offend a lot of different people, but that's okay. I'm just speaking my heart here. You don't need a consultant. Consultants are something that are for those who are privileged to have enough money to afford one. All you need is a belief in our Constitution, an ability to run. You can't not have 5 months that you can dedicate to going up to the Capitol in Columbia. But if you have those things and you have a real passion for making sure things are constitutional, then you have all the requirements necessary. And don't feel like, well, I've heard that I've got to raise $100,000. And, if I go to, this guy over here, he says it's $10,000 up front and then this much a month. And then I got to pay a bonus of 10,000, because these are all things I've heard. And I'm just here to tell you that, no, you don't need to do any of that. Again, retail campaigning, go out and knock on the doors, speak to your constituents face to face. And yeah, you will have to have some money. You're going to have some signs, and you will need to probably do a mailer or two. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you want to know how to do that without it being as expensive as they are purporting it to be, give me a call, 803-627-2393, because I'm going to tell you, I'm doing it. I'm doing it by hand. It means I've put enough stickers and stamps on envelopes lately.
But
and
I'm printers now and everything. You can do your own printing. It's not as hard as it used to be.
Exactly. You don't have to
at least to start, right? At least to start. Right.
Exactly. So, and I won't charge you for that advice. I won't ask you to pay me anything. I'm not. I want to help people that are really committed to our Constitution, and yet they don't feel like they have the resources to run. Call me. I'll be glad to help you out in any way I can. Well, folks, that's all we got for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you always liking and sharing what you hear. And that's all I have. John, anything else from you today?
That's it. I'm out.
All right. Well, as always, God bless, Godspeed, and we will see you next time.